On Friday, August 31, Alan Jones declared, "Women are destroying the joint." This was in response to Julia Gillard announcing that she was providing $320 million worth of aid to women in the Pacific to help advance their political, economic, and social participation in that region. Alan Jones' response was to say, she, when he was referring to the Prime Minister and not the cat's mother, she says that our societies don't reach their full potential unless women are politically participating in the society. What's he on about, he said. My God, we've got Clover Moore in Sydney, Christine Nixon in Melbourne, destroying the joint. What will this mean for us? Well, the women of Australia responded. And they got onto Twitter and created a Twitter storm. And that Twitter storm went on for days, where thousands of women told how they are destroying the joint. So that got me thinking about engineers. And I'm probably sure that you all know that that is a very male-dominated profession. Now, for many years, there's been a lot of work to try and address that imbalance, but it's been very hard work and not very many gains have been made. It's interesting, though, that females, when they leave school, and if they do maths and physics, the prerequisites to enter an engineering degree, if they achieve a OP of 1, then they do enrol in an engineering degree in reasonable numbers. But if their OP is less than 1, say out to OP6, they don't enrol, where their male counterparts don't show any such reticence, and they enrol in equal numbers right out to OP6 and 7. So these two ideas collided. The fact that we've got these more women in positions of power and influence, and the fact that we're trying to increase participation of women in engineering. And I started to think, well, should we be doing that? Aren't we going to add to the destruction? So I guess the first thing to say when I thought of, the first response that I had in thinking about that was, well, it's clearly evident that we need to be protecting the joint that the male engineers have established at all costs. You know, let's look at mining engineering, for example. We know that mining engineers extract the resources of the earth because there are an infinite limits to those resources. We know that because we wouldn't be doing it at such an advancing rate. Female engineers, on the other hand, might be able to demonstrate the finite limit to those resources. And you know that's going to destroy the joint. Traffic engineers are focused on moving cars from A to B. And so the response is to build more and more roads to accommodate more and more cars. What female engineers might do is look at how we move people from A to B rather than accommodate more cars. And yes, that will surely destroy the joint completely. Got a little bit over anxious there. Now, we know that it's really, really important that we extract the gas from our coal seams. And it's really important that we do it quickly. That's evident because of the rampant progression of that industry. But we know it's important because we also know that there is a risk to our groundwater, our surface water, and our agricultural lands. So we have to do it, and we have to do it quickly. But if there are more female engineers involved in this process, I wonder if they would consider that renewable is doable right now. And if that were to happen, they would surely destroy the joint. We also know that male engineers have shown that the damage from the infrastructure that's required to deliver that gas across our rural landscapes, through our harbours, is clearly worth the damage that's going to ensure through those added emissions to the atmosphere. We know that they consider that is worth the damage because we know what the damage will be. But if females were in there, they might think about that damage in terms of not just this generation, but generations to come. And you know that will destroy the joint. So there are 10% of engineers in Australia who are women. And recently, Engineers Australia published the 100 most influential of those engineers. So, I'd like to do a little bit of a straw poll. I'd like you all to stand up. Now, I'd like you to sit down if you think there might have been around 50% of those 100 most influential who were female. So there's 100, so 50%, 50. So there's 100 in this audience, nobody? What about 40%? 30? 20? If you sat down. 10? 5? 3? We're going to blast off soon. 2? Oh, well done. 2. So imagine if you were amongst your peers in this room, there's 100 of us, there would only be 2 of you who would be female. Now, you don't need to be an engineer to figure out that there's something wrong with the maths here. Because I've already said that women are generally at the top when they leave school. They generally have an OP1. And I can tell you that my experience suggests that they stay at that level. But there are 10% of them in the workforce as engineers, but only 2 are the most influential of the 100. So the maths doesn't add up. But we must be very, very careful if we are to change the maths here. And be warned that this could destroy the joint. So I just want to give some examples of some engineers who are out there doing great things. This is a couple of women engineers who have been in the army in Afghanistan, operating in a very hostile environment as construction engineers. Now, I'm reliably informed by their commanding officer that they in fact bring an added dimension to their role, because for them, it's not just about building the structures, building and designing the structures, it's also about changing hearts and minds one at a time. Engineers Australia are also doing wonderful things in trying to encourage participation of female engineers in the workforce. And in the Code of Ethics for Engineers Australia, sustainability is one of the 4 tenets. And that's been a struggle, I guess, over recent years for many who haven't considered that paradigm in a lot of their work. And there have been many who have facilitated that journey. One of the ones that I find most inspirational is a guy called David Hood, who is our current president of Engineers Australia. Now, David doesn't actually believe that sustainability should be an element of everything we do in engineering. He, in fact, believes that it needs to be the core of what we do. It's not just an element we need to consider, it should be the core of us as a profession. So I greatly admire David. But be warned, the climate change is, we know the projections of climate change are for more windy days. So we need to be very careful, because this is a picture of my great-grandfather, who was a great horseman. And he knew horses and women and dogs. He had a saying that you should never work women, horses or dogs on a windy day. But just to prove that he was a man of his word, here's a picture of him taken on a windy day in Singapore. So what I'd like you to consider, if we invest in engineers, female engineers, we're going to get a diminishing rate of return because of the number of windy days we're going to continually receive. Here's a father of an engineer, who's a father of an engineer, who is also a father of 2 engineers, of which I am one. I hope that he and the engineers that he produced are proud of my participation in trying to destroy the joint.